I have a direct quote from the President of the United States on NATO, and I will share it with all of you. They were tested and they failed. And I would add, it's quite sad that NATO turned their backs on the American people over the course of the last 6 weeks when it's the American people who have been funding their defense. As you know, President Trump will be meeting with Secretary Rutte in a couple of hours here at the White House, and I know he looks forward to having a very frank and candid conversation with him. It's something the President has discussed, and I think it's something the President will be discussing in a couple of hours with Secretary.
Is the United States still considering withdrawing from NATO? Is that still a possibility?
It's something the President has discussed, and I think it's something the President will be discussing in a couple of hours with Secretary-General Rutte, and perhaps you'll hear directly from the President following that meeting later this afternoon. Thank you.
Would it be acceptable to the United States at the end of all this if the Iranians are able to charge tolls in the Strait of Hormuz?
I think the President was very clear and simplistic in his language last night in his Truth Social post, where he said that this ceasefire is subject to the free, safe, and immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That's very plain language, and it should be taken at face value. Next week is tax week. You'll hear a lot from the President about how his policies have benefited the
President has said Cuba is next. What's the message to the American people regarding Cuba, and what can Cubans expect in relation to this statement?
Well, look, I think when President Trump said that, and he later clarified after making that statement, that he meant the Cuban regime is bound to fall. The country is very weak. They're in a very weak position economically, obviously, financially. The Cuban people are fed up with their government, as they should be. And these talks and discussions continue to happen at the highest level of our government. I don't have any updates or announcements for you with respect to Cuba policy today. Sure. Well, with respect to the first reporting out of Iranian state media, the President was made aware of those reports before I came to the podium. That is completely unacceptable. And again, this is a case of what they're saying publicly is different privately. We have seen an uptick of traffic in the Strait today, and I will reiterate the President's expectation and demand that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened immediately, quickly, and safely. That is his expectation. It has been relayed to him privately that is what's taking place, and these reports publicly are false.
Karoline. Would President Trump like to see Lebanon included in this peace deal? Because as you know, there have been increased Israeli strikes on Lebanon today with dozens of casualties there.
Sure. Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire. That has been relayed to all parties involved in the ceasefire. As you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu put out a statement last night in support of the ceasefire, in support of the United States' efforts, and he's also assured the President they'll continue to be a helpful partner throughout the course of the next 2 weeks.
The U.S. take part in talks with Iran in Islamabad on Friday.
I can announce that the President is dispatching his negotiating team, led by the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Witkoff, and Mr. Kushner to Islamabad for talks this weekend. The first round of those talks will take place on Saturday morning local time, and we look forward to those in-person meetings.
Karoline, the President yesterday threatened that a whole civilization would die if a ceasefire deal wasn't reached, understanding that Iranian leaders have previously said death to America. But why is it appropriate for the President of the United States to use that kind of language when talking about civilian targets? And was the President mocking Islam by signing off his Truth Social post over the weekend, praise be to Allah? Wouldn't that antagonize Muslim allies across the world?
Well, I understand the questions about the President's rhetoric, but what the President cares most about is results. And in fact, his very tough rhetoric and his tough negotiating style is what has led to the result that you are all witnessing today. Iran publicly acknowledging last night that they have agreed or that they wanted this ceasefire with the United States because they no longer could tolerate being bombed by our very powerful and lethal military, and that they have committed to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which the President will hold them accountable for, and it's something the administration is closely monitoring in real time.
So,
Danny.
Should the world not take his word seriously?
The world should take his word very seriously in understanding that the President is always most interested in results. And it was the Iranians who backed down, not President Trump. He said that they would face very grave consequences, as you just laid out, by the 8 p.m. deadline if they did not agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And what did they do last night? They agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
What was your understanding of what he meant when he said, this civilization is going to be eliminated? What was your understanding of what he meant when he said, this civilization is going to be eliminated?
I think it was a very, very strong threat from the President of the United States that led the Iranian regime to cave to their knees and ask for a ceasefire and agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So it was a very strong threat that led to results. And as the Secretary of War, something we should all be grateful for.
The United States is a moral leader in the world, given that he
I was asked this exact same question by your colleague Andrew in the back, and I think again the insinuation by anyone in this room that Iran somehow has the moral high ground over the United States of America is insulting, considering the atrocities that they have committed against our people and our military over the past 5 decades. Track record of achieving good deals on behalf of the United States and the American.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to Mirror Now.